Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. It's been a while. It's been a minute since we've done one of these, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I'm also looking forward to the sun going down because the lighting in the evening here gets a little crazy. But either way, we have lots of different subjects and topics we could cover. Of course, I'd like to kick off every EV stream with a subject to kind of get us going. But of course, whatever the chat brings up, I will try to address as long as it's EV related. But yeah, the main one I wanted to talk about today was some record high, at least for me, record high prices of supercharging. And this has been a recurring topic that's being brought up more and more lately because Tesla has been increasing the prices of supercharging. And that's begging the question and leading to a lot of online discussion about is EVs, still technically cheaper to road trip with than gas cars. In this latest story that I showed in the thumbnail, which is came to my attention from Sawyer Merritt. I don't know if it was him himself that brought up the story, but basically there's a supercharger in California with peak hours, a peak rate of 65 cents a kilowatt hour. I've never seen that before. I think in a few places I've seen third-party stations get crazy high kilowatt hours like that, but I've definitely never seen a supercharger list a kilowatt hour at that price before. So of course the people who hate on EVs or people who don't like EVs immediately go, see, that's the plan all along. It's not actually cheaper, but gas cars aren't that bad. Okay, so first of all, we should address the elephant in the room that most people don't supercharge as their only charging solution. At least on average. There's still a very large percentage of people that don't have home charging available, so they have to supercharge, but I don't think that's the most common scenario. I don't think that's what most people are doing. At least I haven't seen any data to back that up. Oh, wow, thank you. Option Command Media, thank you for the super chat. It says school is a hoax. Have a good evening. Thank you. Man, there's a lot to unpack there. The hoax, I think, means not real. So while we may have our issues with school, I don't know if I agree that it's not a real thing. But anyway, that's during peak hours. So at that same exact station, between the hours of 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., it's actually 21 cents a kilowatt hour, which is way cheaper than it is actually even at my own home. Just charging from home cost me 32 cents a kilowatt hour here, which is on average very high. Most people have a much cheaper electric rate. And the other, I think, important thing in context to keep in mind is, for one, the majority of charging is done at home, but that's why I kind of wanted to title this stream and kick it off with, let's talk about road tripping specifically, because I think it's pretty easy for people to say, okay, maybe on a road trip, the prices get high, but ultimately most people are charging from home. Most people, like in my experience from what I've seen, I'm paying 32 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's a lot. That's an insane amount for a home that, is just pulling normal power from the grid with the base tier. I'm not being pushed into some special higher tier where they have to charge me more. No, I'm just like an average guy, pretty small house to be honest, and I'm not using that much power aside from my EV. Now that the EV's here, it's changed some things, but most people are paying less than 30 cents a kilowatt hour, in which case, yeah, in order to get gasoline to the same price of 30 cents a kilowatt hour, I think if you do the math, I haven't done it recently, but the last time I calculated it, you basically have to get gas to around $2 a gallon. Very few people in the world are able to pay $2 a gallon for gasoline, especially these days. That's exceptionally rare. Even the cheap places in the country are usually in the $3 range. Electrify America chargers seem to be much cheaper than Tesla superchargers now. Hey, you know what? Maybe that's why Tesla wanted to launch the CCS connector now, so that you'd have more options and Tesla wouldn't have to take all of the load. But okay, if we're just talking purely about road tripping, from my math, because I think I'm in a fairly unique position where I can compare my fuel efficient Hyundai Sonata to my Tesla Model 3, which are both roughly the same size. They're both pretty aerodynamic. I know it's not apples to apples. There's probably some new Toyota hybrid I could compare it to, but ultimately, our Sonata was basically like a 17-gallon tank. It's a little bit more than that, but I'm rounding down. And with a full tank, we can go, even at highway speeds, around 500 miles without stopping. And to keep the math simple, I'm rounding down a little bit because I know Teslas, especially at highway speeds, don't hit their EPA estimated range. So I'm just going to assume the range of my Model 3, you know, mixed in with some city driving, is about 250 miles, right? That keeps the math pretty easy. I assume that charging up my car from 0 to 100, which I don't do, but for the sake of the example, charging up my car from 0 to 100 gets me about half the distance that a full tank of gas would get on my Sonata. So it depends on what your average wants to be, but if you're in a good area and you know where you can get some cheaper gas prices. Sometimes if you buy gas from casinos, they get to bypass some of the California gas taxes. So let's just assume an average of $5 a gallon, which may seem high or low depending on where you're watching this from. But $5 a gallon, and we assume not quite a full tank, but 17 gallons is about $85 to go from empty to full on the on this old Sonata. And with this car, it has about a 62 kilowatt hour battery pack, so I do 62 kilowatt hours. And let's assume I'm charging at the peak time, which, to be fair, like I have in the thumbnail of this stream, the charge rate, while it has these different hourly rates and the peak rate is the most expensive one, the time for the peak rate is quite a large window. It's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So basically for half the day, they're charging 65 cents a kilowatt hour. So I'm going to put in 65 cents a kilowatt hour, roughly costs $40 if I was charging at that station to go from 0 to 100. That takes me 250 miles. So double that to go the same distance as the Sonata, and we come up to $80. So this is why I wanted to talk about it, because sure, technically the EV was a little bit cheaper, but it's probably a skewed example because my Sonata's like, 15 years old, and there's more fuel-efficient cars on the market now that could probably go further or consume less fuel than my Sonata does. So basically, if we're talking about the difference of $5 over 500 miles, it's a toss-up, right? Like, it could depend on, you know, the wind that day, how efficient your driving is. Driving behavior could influence that stuff. Yeah, so, like, once you start nearing, at least where I live, once you start nearing, like, 65 cents a kilowatt hour or 70 cents a kilowatt hour, that's when you're approaching essentially the same price per mile as gasoline. For equally spec'd cars. Obviously, if you're driving a Rivian and comparing that to a Prius, that you're going to get different data. But as far as just comparing sedans to sedans and fuel economy versus charging, I do think that it's kind of upsetting to know that maybe EVs don't always save you money on every circumstance. Now, keep in mind, most people are not road tripping every single time, every single drive. The majority of driving, you know, based on average driving data, most people drive to work and back. On average, that's around 30 to 40 miles a day. Most people have a way to charge at home. So I don't think this means that, boom, cost of EV ownership is therefore is the same as gas or higher. I still think on average, in most circumstances, it is still going to be cheaper to road trip because, again, this is one location. And it's important to keep in mind that this one location that we're comparing to is in a busy part of California where gas prices are also very high. So I know there's a few circumstances where you get low gas prices and high supercharging costs. I've seen people bring it up in the comments. Mostly the only example I've seen that happening with is Utah. There's several places in Utah, I guess, where because of where the chargers are located and maybe because it's it's not densely populated or whatever, it costs a certain amount because a lot of supercharging rates are dictated by what the cost of electricity is in that area. So if the cost of electricity is high in your area, but I don't know if you're by a refinery or something and you're able to get gas for cheap, then there are certain circumstances where, honestly, taking a road trip in supercharging might start to cost more than what it would cost you to drive in a gas car. But that does not mean Utah is an example of the rest of the world. Because in this particular example, where we're seeing sky-high, like record-breaking supercharging costs at 65 cents a kilowatt hour, in that same area, the average price of gas is like $6 a gallon or more. So I was being generous with the gas prices with my example. So if I assume a 17-gallon tank, but it's $6 a gallon, yeah, to go from 0 to 100, that's like over $100. Not 0 to 100, empty tank to full tank. Yeah, I think you know what I mean. To fill up a gas car, it's going to be over $100 in that same area to fill up, to go that same 500 miles in a fairly fuel efficient, energy efficient EV. It's going to cost $80. So the cost savings are a bit more noticeable in that respect, but still not major. So I still ultimately think where you're going to see the biggest cost advantages in month-to-month ownership. Thank you, Alpha, by the way. He's supercharging the channel, which doesn't cost 65 cents a kilowatt hour. That only costs $2 a month, and I appreciate that. $2 a month. That's about 3 kilowatt hours at this peak charging station. But I do appreciate Tesla for sending out notices. They actually sent out emails to people saying, hey, by the way, we're going to be raising prices, or they actually said changing prices depending on where you go. There were a few places where people were saying supercharging prices were getting decreased. But I think it's very, very easy, especially in the FUD, because people love to hate on EVs or justify their gas cars, or just brag about the fact that EVs are not that much better. People hang on to these little details. So thank you, Michael Burkhardt, as well, for buying 3 kilowatt hours worth of support for this channel. That's very nice of you. So essentially, the vast majority of charging is still going to be cheaper than the vast majority of gas. Are there a few instances where the charging starts to outprice the gas? Yes, it's not impossible anymore. Whereas maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was pretty easy to say that no matter what circumstance you're in, no matter where you are in the world, charging is always going to be cheaper than gas. And now that's changing. But I don't think it's a sign of Tesla's greed necessarily. I think, honestly, in some ways, not always, so don't take this statement I'm about to make out of context. In some ways, it's kind of a good thing that supercharging costs are going up. Now, let me explain before you freak out about me saying that. What it encourages is it makes sure that the only people that are supercharging, which is, a pretty high demand on the grid. We're already at a point where people are running. The biggest strain on the grid is not EVs, by the way. It's HVAC. So whenever temperatures get really, really high, everybody cranks the HVAC. That's whenever we get these rolling blackouts. So that's when we get notices from our energy providers that say, hey, by the way, you better cool down. You better raise your thermostats. You better do something because we're going to overwhelm the grid. It doesn't happen because everyone's charging their EV. However, with that being said, supercharging stations, particularly high-powered ones that have like the one in the thumbnail of this video. Oh, thank you, Unic, as well, for buying 3.5 kilowatt hours worth of support for the channel. All this supercharging going on, and I'm telling you guys not to supercharge. But this is a 20-stall supercharger, 20 stalls that all support 250 kilowatts. And because Tesla can ramp production faster than anybody, they are cranking out vehicles right now, most of which, this is the exception, but every Tesla except for the one I'm in right now can support 250 kilowatts. So when you get 20 Teslas in a busy city and they're all charging at 250 kilowatts, this is a pretty big strain on the grid. It costs Tesla a lot to pull that much energy and to make sure that's always available, especially when there's a lot of people driving or road tripping in the middle of the day, which happens. People typically like to drive, get up in the morning, start driving on their road trips, and that's what I did. I was charging my car at peak hours. So it makes sense that Tesla is raising prices in a way to discourage people that don't need to supercharge or could charge somewhere else. Because I think a lot of people are just thinking like, well, supercharging, that's the most convenient. I'll just go to that one, right? What's the big deal? I don't need to check out EVgo. I don't need to try Electrify America. Like, none of that stuff matters. I got a supercharger. Tesla superchargers are the best. They're the fastest. I got a Tesla. I'm going to use the supercharger. There's some people that probably don't need that supercharging speed, but it's convenient for them, so they go to it. Now Tesla is changing the equation a bit by now saying, well, if you are going to supercharge and a lot of people are using this charger, we're going to raise the prices. And if you don't like that, hopefully that encourages you to, oh, well, maybe I should install a home charger and make sure I'm charging from home because that'll save me money. Or maybe I should check out a third-party charge network. Maybe I should try EVgo because this one has a cheaper rate, lower prices. It's a bit slower, but maybe this EVgo station's by a grocery store or a restaurant I like. So what I like about it, and again, it's not all good. I'm sure there's still downsides to the supercharging prices being up. I acknowledge that. And it's still kind of sad that there are certain circumstances now where charging an EV on a road trip is more expensive than driving a gas car. That kind of sucks. I admit that's a bit of a bummer. However, one of the positive side effects is it may encourage people to not use superchargers unless they absolutely need to. If you're just in a situation where, oh my God, like I need a charge right now and I don't have any other options, okay, that sucks that you're paying more for that than you were before. I apologize on behalf of Tesla, because Tesla's not going to apologize, so I'm sorry, that's a bummer. But if you're one of those people that are like, well, I could charge from home, but I just never really got around to it, or I guess I could use Electrify America, but I don't want to deal with the adapters. Yeah, it's not my Tesla ecosystem. I like the simple, you plug it in, it starts charging. It is nice. I acknowledge that convenience is great, and it's one of the great things I love about owning a Tesla is having that supercharger network. However, I appreciate that Tesla is making people maybe think more strategically with their charging, especially by showing up on the app directly like, hey, if you come back and charge after 8 p.m., it'll only cost 47 cents a kilowatt hour, which is, in this area, roughly half the price of gas, or probably less than half the price of gas. So you see those prices, and you go, yeah, okay, I could wait till the evening. We might go out later, and there's a place I like nearby, our Supercharger, so I'll charge later in the day. That kind of planning and encouraging people to charge during less peak hours is ultimately a good thing. And price is the easiest way to convince people to change their mind on something. Like, would this be effective if Tesla just sent out emails to everyone and said, hey, you better not charge during those peak hours? Like, some people probably would listen, but other people are like, sure. Yeah, I'm just going to charge what I want. But pricing higher during the peak hours and lower during the off-peak hours, yeah, like Alpha said, supply and demand. That's really what it comes down to. So I've been rambling for a while here, so I want to address the chat. 70 says, I drove 1,600 miles round trip a month ago and it cost $160. Equivalent gas would be $300. Oh, yeah, no, we've all got great examples of that. I think definitely 70, no debate that the vast majority of EV driving is still much cheaper than gas. It's just we're starting to see the number of circumstances where gas being cheaper than charging was zero, probably for the last few years. And now, in the past 12 months or so, with the rising prices of charging, it's starting to turn into, okay, it's not zero. It happens, it's rare, but we can't say it never happens anymore. Alpha says 32 cents per kilowatt hour is still about a 50% saving. Yeah, it depends on where you are, depends on what gas is in your area. But yes, it's typically very, very rare for you to be in a place where gasoline... That's the other thing. Typically, in the places where gasoline is cheap, electricity is also cheap. It's a very few circumstances. I feel like Utah's the only example I keep seeing, but there's very few circumstances where the electricity is expensive, but the gas is cheap. So typically, like, there's places in Texas that, people were mentioning that they're finally starting to see gas go below $3 a gallon again. In a lot of places in Texas, especially the places where gas is cheap, electricity is, you're probably not paying what I'm paying, like 32 cents a kilowatt hour. See, the sun went down. I hope you can still see me okay, but it's nice that the sun is not blinding me anymore. What's going on? There's chickens running around. We don't own chickens, but our neighbors do, and they just let them loose, so now there's just chickens running around our yard. Once the grid is supported by Tesla, supercharging will be pennies. I don't know if I agree about that. I feel like as more EVs are on the road, and especially as there's more fast charging EVs on the road, the increase in demand for electricity is only going to grow. Like someone like me, who, we have an air conditioner and we use it in the summer and stuff, but on average, we were using probably, in certain times of the year, less than 10 kilowatt hours a day. And now that we own an EV, it's like usually almost always over 20 kilowatt hours a day, depending on how much we drive or how hot it is, whether or not we run the AC. But we're kind of crazy in that way. Like, we'll leave off our AC for extended periods of time. And I don't think most people are like that. So, and we're also the kind of family that could get by with just owning a very fuel efficient sedan. Basically, Department of Energy actually just disclosed once again that the Model 3 rear-wheel drive is the most energy efficient vehicle on the road. So I was just like, yeah, that's right. That's us. But I admit that I work from home. My wife doesn't need to drive to work or anything like that. So we are not a typical family. As the future unfolds and more people switch to electric, energy demand is going to get higher and higher and higher. So I don't think that just from megapacks and solar alone, supercharging cost will drop to zero. I think that it will almost always make more financial sense to charge from home, especially if you have solar panels and Powerwall at your house. That's going to be the cheapest way to charge, and supercharging is going to be only because it requires more work. It requires more hardware. It requires more installation equipment, and it requires a lot more infrastructure to be able to support, 20, 30, sometimes 50 vehicles all charging at like 200 kilowatts or more. That's going to require a lot more servicing, because the superchargers can go down. Sometimes people break them or back into them, and that needs to be serviced. That's always, I think, just objectively going to cost more than doing it from home. And I saw people bringing that up as an example as well in the Twitter replies, because obviously once the news was breaking about supercharging costs going way up, people are like, see, this is the point. Like, I told you gas is not that expensive anyway. But a lot of the replies are like, well, I would compare supercharging to eating out versus cooking at home. Just like paying someone to do something for you is always going to cost more than just doing it at home. And I know that there's not a person running the supercharger, but still, in the same way, you're relying on someone else installing fancy equipment to enable you to charge much faster. That's just always going to objectively be more pricey and more complicated than just plugging into an outlet at home, installing your own equipment, charging at a slower speed. That's just less complicated, and you're maintaining it. You're worrying about all that tech. So I don't personally think supercharging will ever go down to pennies. It might. I personally think it's going to stay around where it is. I don't think it'll get to the point where like all superchargers at all times of the day always cost more than gas. I don't think we'll get there, but the line between, I think Tesla's fairly calculated about this, and from what I can tell, pretty much all the superchargers that have high pricing are superchargers that are in areas where gas is really expensive. So that's what makes me think I should lock my doors. I didn't see anything. I just realized like the car's unlocked. That's kind of weird. Here in Texas, gas is finally below $3. That's good. Let me catch up. EVs were much cheaper 5 years ago. Everyone got tax credit. Electricity was way cheaper for home charging. Supercharging was free. That's true. For a time, supercharging was free on certain vehicles. And actually, a family member of mine, kind of distant, but I've talked to him a few times. He owns a Model S that still has the free unlimited supercharging on it, and he still loves it. He drives it. It's from 2015. And I chatted with him about it last year. So he still loves it. And I asked him, like, how's it doing? Do you notice any battery degradation? And he was like, no, not really. I just charge it whenever. And it was nice to get free supercharging. But honestly, I totally get why Tesla got rid of it. Not just from a financial standpoint. Like, yes, as a business, it doesn't make sense to provide that kind of service forever. But also from incentivizing package, like you are encouraging people to not charge at home. You're encouraging people to not charge during off-peak hours. You're encouraging people to supercharge because it's cheaper. It's great for the consumer. Like I would love to have free supercharging if they offered it. I wouldn't complain. From my point of view, it's nice. But from a grand scale, like how we treat the grid and how we handle all of our energy, yeah, long term, it's not sustainable to keep giving out free supercharging passes for life. I get why they got rid of that. Even on their most expensive Teslas, you could buy a full self-driving equipped Plaid Model X with 6 seats and a white interior and a red exterior and the best wheels, all of that, and you still got to pay for supercharging. I think that's fine. Rob says, where I live, my utility company charges 26 cents a kilowatt. You guys keep saying kilowatt. if you're talking about 26 cents per this, it's kilowatt hour, please. Home charging. It is 31 cents a kilowatt hour at my nearest supercharger. I bought a CCS adapter for the free 100 kilowatt charger less than 10 minutes from my home. Well, there you go. If yeah, those are pretty close in price. I would still personally charge at home just because I'm sure you're using a lot of kilowatt hours, but yeah. It is cheaper. I bet I'll use Electrify America to support the channel. Well, you win some and you lose some with Electrify America because on average, from what I've been seeing, Electrify America usually has cheaper rates, especially if you sign up for their membership where like it's $4 a month or something, which is not very much, but for $4 a month, you get like way cheaper kilowatt hour prices. So everyone I know who uses Electrify America is like, even if you just charge one time a month, that $4 subscription becomes worth it because you typically save like $6 to $8 per session for that $4 charge. So yeah, it's totally worth it. And the only issue is Electrify America is known for being more problematic and less reliability and a lot of not being transparent. Probably one of the most common issues I've seen both from Out of Spec and the all EV family. There's several channels that have talked about this. Electrify America will say certain stations are online, and then you get there and they're not online, which is a pretty big problem. If your EV trip is all planning around, we need to be able to stop and charge at this location, and then online it says, yeah, you can charge there, and then you get there and you can't. That's a really big problem. So there's reliability issues. It's more complex because you have different EVs charging there. So you have to be like, okay, if I'm this kind of EV, I should charge at this stall because it's 150 kilowatt, or I should charge at this stall because it's 350 kilowatt. But if I'm after a certain charge percentage, then I should move and go to the slower one so that this Ioniq 5 that showed up can charge at the faster. It's just more complicated in general than supercharging is. So there's downsides to Electrify America, but if you're willing to put up with the lack of reliability and the complexities with the setup, and you got to use the adapter and everything, and it's not usually just plug and charge. You got to plug in and then tell the screen what you want it to do and you know, swipe a card and stuff. Certain cars support plug and charge, but if we're talking Teslas, which I'm sorry, a lot of people don't like to admit this, but Teslas are the most common EV, at least in the United States, and pretty much everywhere else. So, Teslas don't have plug and charge with Electrify America. You got to get the app and sign up and tell it which stall you're at it. So there's a bit more to put up with, but you'll probably get lower rates. I'm sorry I didn't address it in the video. I did do a video talking about the new CCS adapter. Some people were asking like, well, Drew, are you picking one up? I was like, Drew, you should have mentioned that in the video. You're right, I should have. No, I don't. It's probably fine that I don't mention it because I didn't have much to say about it, but there's not really any Electrify America stations in my area. I've looked up where they are. I've seen one, but it's not in a place that I go to regular. It's not near me, and I'm not even close to a supercharger, but a supercharger is closer to me than Electrify America. So it's kind of out of the way. There's not really a point. There's not really any example of where that I can imagine where it would make sense for me to use Electrify America. On the road trips I do, superchargers are plentiful. Maybe in the future, if we do another road trip and we're unhappy with the cost of supercharging, and then we want to see, well, how much would this same trip cost? Like, I don't know when exactly we're going to do this. Probably not for a while because we're just busy right now. But next year at some point, I want to go up and visit my family out of state, which is a pretty long drive. It's around 800 miles or so there. Maybe it would be fun to do like 800 miles on the supercharging network, and then on the way back, take Electrify America and see if it results in a drastically different experience. But it's also such a long drive that I don't know if I want to risk it because if it goes horribly wrong, then we're going to be stuck. So I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. But I usually just tow a generator with us for long drives. Really? Do you tow? How does the towing affect your range? Here in South Florida, they just dropped the price for peak prices at superchargers. That's great. In fact, one thing I'm very happy about is usually during emergency situations, which a lot of Florida is in an emergency right now, Tesla will just enable free supercharging at a giant group of superchargers, which I think they actually did back in Florida when they got hit by another hurricane. They were just like, yeah, everybody can charge for free during this time. because Tesla was just like, we're not trying to, like, profit off of a tragedy, and there's a lot of people that are evacuating and trying to get out of the area. So um let's see. Chelsea Stinson says Dr. Know-It-All says his is only 3 cents per kilowatt hour home charging. Yeah, I've seen a few places that are like that. Actually, my parents' place up north is 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's even more impressive. But yeah, I was like, 6 cents a kilowatt hour. I got to do the math on that. I have a 62 kilowatt hour battery pack. If I was charging at 6 cents a kilowatt hour, it would cost me $3.72 to go from 0 to 100 in my car. That's incredible. Um, so basically, times that by 2, it would cost me less than $7.50 to go 500 miles if I was purely just charging from, not a road trip, but driving 500 miles around town, charging from home. That's pretty sweet. That's pretty impressive. Um, do you think the new CCS adapter will cause Electrify America to totally collapse? I don't think they're like all interconnected. Like if you start using all these, then that means the whole network goes down. I feel like Electrify America is kind of already falling apart. So Tesla's just kind of riding that wave now. And I definitely don't think like most Tesla owners are buying that adapter. I feel like you have to be kind of more geeky and a bit more into the Tesla community and to know about those non-supercharging locations. So I don't think like most people will buy it, but it will probably result in an uptick in usage at Electrify America stations. And yeah, maybe you're onto something there. Maybe that will encourage more people to charge there. Therefore, those chargers will wear out faster. The connectors or the cables will break more. Especially if like most people charging there are using adapters. I wonder if that will have an impact. Yeah, it's something that I hope they can address, but I don't know. Just the way Electrify America has treated people who complain about their network has been concerning to me. Like, they were reaching out to multiple people who were complaining about the network just being unreliable. They're like, hey, this isn't working, and you said it is working. I want to see if this light helps here. Yeah, a little bit. This little sun visor light is kind of nice. Let me see also if the Tesla screen, if I turn on light mode. Yeah, it doesn't. Maybe if I boost the brightness. Maybe it helps a little bit. It's just getting a little dark, and I just want you guys to be able to see me okay. But they were literally telling people to like stop complaining about the network, and they were like, "You're not supposed to, like, you're not helping." That was the words they were using, I guess. I was like, guys, you should fix the network. Don't tell people to stop complaining like that. I don't understand their logic there. And just seeing like them say these new stations we've developed are supposed to be better, and then people use them and they still run into issues with them, is just like, the fact that this whole process, this whole brand was basically built on VW Dieselgate. Like, it was almost a settlement that they had to start building this network. And someone explained it to me as basically like, financially, EA is encouraged to build more chargers, but they have no financial incentive to maintain the charging networks, the charging stations that are already up. So it felt very flawed, and it's one of the reasons that I've honestly have a very, very hard time switching to a non-Tesla at this point, based on how I've seen them treat others and how I've seen them treat their customers, and the fact that there's so many great EVs on the market right now, outside of Tesla even. Yeah, like there's the VW ID4 is great, Ioniq 5 is great, EV6 is great, but knowing that basically all of these brands are just going to rely on EA, and that's pretty much it, is concerning to me. Like, seeing us relying on this like unresponsive, lack of transparency, kind of like rude approach to anyone that criticizes them, of like, hey, shut up about our network, for someone that's just like, hey, I'm trying to charge, my car will not charge, and you shouldn't tell people that this station is active when it's not. Yeah, like that's concerning to me. So I'm very grateful that this car can supercharge. And I'm hoping that Tesla, when they start ramping up their new superchargers that do support CCS, it does not mean that all superchargers are going to open for all CCS EVs. I think a lot of people are misunderstanding that. It's honestly really concerning. Because I pretty much watch nothing but EV content these days. That's almost 100% of my watch history at this point. So many people think that every supercharger is going to turn into a CCS charger. And that's not what's happening. Like, I haven't seen Tesla confirm that. I haven't seen Elon even refer to it that way. I haven't seen the rollout go that way in Europe. And based on the Magic Dock patent that Tesla has, like, I'm fairly confident at this point new superchargers after a certain point, which hasn't started yet, new superchargers will support CCS, but not every supercharger. They're not just going to add the Magic Dock to every supercharger. That would take forever and it'd be way too complicated. And the cables are not long enough to accommodate for all the different EVs with charge ports in different places. Doug says, my standard message to Congress and state legislatures, gotta fund charger maintenance for a good long time, solid uptime. I agree. I think that needs to be incentivized much more. Before purchasing your Tesla, what other EVs were you considering? Nothing really we got that serious about. I mean, ultimately, even before I even started an EV channel, long before I even thought about making videos about electric vehicles, I wanted a Tesla. Because I always hated gas, even before Tesla existed. I remember being a kid, and I was really pumped that, like, a teacher at my school got a hybrid. And I was just like, whoa, that's so cool. If you're under this speed, it doesn't use any gas. Like, ever since I was a kid, I hated gas cars, even when there was really no alternative at all. And, I heard about the Leaf and all electric vehicles, and I was like, that's the future. But of course, all those vehicles were so heavily compromised on range and charging speed, and of course they looked kind of dorky or whatever. So I was just like, yeah, I mean, that is the future, but there's nothing really on the market that I could label as like dream vehicle until the Tesla came around. And I did find out about Tesla around when the Model S was launching. That's when my dad read about them in like a auto magazine, and he was showing it to me, and he's like, this car has no gas in it at all. And I was like, what? Okay, that's my dream. So as soon as I saw the Tesla Model S and they talked about how the range was good and the charging speed was good, and basically I could tell from the ground up, Tesla was like, we're trying to replace all cars. Whereas any other EV, like I remember watching the Who Killed the Electric Car documentary as a kid, but like the EV1, it was like all of those early EVs, even the Nissan Leaf, were kind of looked at as, this is your secondary like city car. You can use an EV for daily driving, but then you got to have a gas car for all these other things. Whereas when the Model S dropped, that was when I saw a company and a brand that was trying to push like, an EV can be like anything. It doesn't have to be a compromise. Like, this can be your road trip vehicle. This can be your daily driver. This can be functional. This can be cool. This can be fast. It can be practical. So there wasn't really anything that interesting that compelled us to get anything other than Tesla. I mean, we had some talks about, like before we committed that we definitely wanted to buy a Tesla, like before we announced to you guys that, like, okay, we're saving up for the Tesla now. All the revenue from the channel is going to go straight to the Tesla fund. Before that, we kind of talked about getting an Aptera when that was unveiled, because we were like, hey, that's cheap, but it's efficient, and it would be perfect for us because it was just the two of us. So we were like, maybe that could be a great option if it comes out. But of course, it's still a startup. They still haven't delivered anything yet. So we were kind of not super serious about it, because we were like, if the Aptera comes out, then we'll get one, but we don't know if it's going to come out. The company went under before and it came back. I'm still very much rooting for the Aptera, but that was maybe one non-Tesla we were considering. And, I'll admit, after we went to the Rivian first mile event, we talked a bit about it. We just sat in the Rivian and got to play with the gear tunnel and the R1T, and we were just kind of playing with the configurator a bit. We were like, yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's pretty nice. But ultimately, it didn't take long for us to just realize that, what do we need a truck for? Like, we're not truck people. It just doesn't make sense. Like, it's cool. I like the way trucks look, and I like their functionality, and I like their utility, but I work from home, and my wife definitely doesn't need a truck. We don't go camping all that much, and if we bought the truck, we would be trying to come up with reasons to use the truck. And in hindsight, I'm very grateful I didn't get the Rivian or reserve the Rivian, because I would, again, have to rely on the Electrify America network, and it would be about half as efficient as this car, so the charging cost would be much, much higher. Pretty sure the insurance would be much higher as well. And it's a startup with a vehicle that's not been in production very long. So ultimately, I'm grateful we didn't go forward with that. But it was we kind of talked about maybe getting a Rivian over at Tesla, but uh, nothing very legit. We never got too deep into the idea. Let's see. I personally wouldn't buy the adapter. I'd rather wait in line at a busy supercharger than hope Electrify America works. Yeah, I can kind of understand that. I'll be charging at home to support the channel now. Thank you, Michael. Let's see. Tesla also removed range limits through an over-the-air update. At supercharging? I thought that they had one, like, until I charged myself. Like, when I got to the supercharger, it was like, you charge at this until this percentage, and then you can reach your next destination. And I thought that's just how superchargers worked until I got there and I realized, oh no, I can set my charge limit to 100 if I want to. I don't know when they changed that, but I do remember other times when I was with friends in their Teslas, or we were renting a Tesla, where you would go to a supercharger and it would say, like, you cannot charge past this percentage because this is too busy of a supercharger. So sorry, you can't charge after that. So I guess you're telling me they've removed that. I don't know exactly if that's true, but at least on my trip, and I was at very busy superchargers, I wasn't at like an empty one. They let me charge to 100% every time if I wanted to. I don't, because usually your charge speed gets very, very slow as you get up to 100. But Nsima says, "Can you explain what's going on with what?" That's a very vague question. Let's see. It's genuinely crazy to me that there's no Electrify America chargers in majority of New York City, none in Brooklyn or Manhattan at all. Must suck to have a non-Tesla in New York City, considering charging at home isn't too realistic when most people park in the streets, don't have private parking lots. Well, yeah, I think owning a car in New York City is probably a bad idea in the first place. Any car, gas or electric. Parking is just going to be a nightmare in a densely populated area like that in the first place. Like, even if you had a parking space, where are you going to drive? Like, where are you going to park? Like, so yeah, I did not know that Electrify America was like barely in New York City, though. I wasn't aware of that. What's going on here? Just got in. Oh, it's an EV live stream. We like to do these. I tried to do them once a week, but last week was crazy busy, so I wasn't able to. But it's just a great way for me to interact with you guys in real time. So if you have questions and you're wondering something, or you want to talk more about something, then bring it up, ask away, and I'll try to address it. But we kick off the stream with the subject that I put in the title and the thumbnail. So we kind of kicked off talking about higher supercharging costs, and we've kind of gone in different directions from there. But yeah, it sounds like Electrify America, yeah, I have heard they buy their hardware from multiple different providers, so that might be some of the cause of the reason. But I've heard people like Bjorn Nyland mention that the CCS connector is more prone to the pins being damaged or the connector not snapping in properly. It's one of the reasons that Aptera is still a big fan of the Tesla connector and why they're pushing for that so hard. Also, another big reason as to why we went with a Tesla over any other EV, because that connector, I appreciate it so much every time I use it. It's so light, it's so easy to hold, and I have still to this day not used a CCS connector, which is kind of funny to say. I've never touched one, but even when I go to one of our charge point locations, which is free, so that's one we've charged at pretty regularly, that's just a J1772 connector. That's not CCS. And it still feels so much bulkier and so much weirder to hold and plug in. It's like, oh, I gotta grab this big bulky thing. That's not even CCS. CCS is way bigger than J17. So yeah, that's something I'm very grateful for, that I didn't buy an EV with CCS. I'm sure I could get used to it. It's probably not a deal breaker, but it's just one of those little details that I appreciate about my Tesla, is like that connector. Oh, it's so elegantly designed. It's so beautiful. What do you think price range would be in 2023, meaning any price decreases for Model Y? So I don't think you'll see them. I don't think they're going to come out of nowhere. What you will see before you see price decreases is wait times decrease. by a lot. Like, we're not anywhere close at this point, in my opinion, to having a price reduction, because as long as you have like a 5-month wait, 6-month wait, it doesn't matter. Even if it's a 3-month wait, if you lower prices, you're either encouraging people to cancel their orders and order again because they're like, well, why did I order at that price and you just lowered it? So usually Tesla doesn't do that because it just results in a huge number of cancellations, which complicates their delivery process and everybody modifies their order. So what Tesla has to do, typically, if they lower prices, is say that everybody who ordered and is still waiting for their car now gets $3,000 or whatever, $2,000 deducted from their vehicle purchase. So essentially you're going to have all these thousands and probably for Tesla tens of thousands of pending orders that haven't gone through yet. And if you reduce the price, you're just leaving all of this money on the table on tens of thousands of reservations and saying, even though these people agreed to pay a certain amount, we're just going to give you all a discount. You know, that'd be nice for us, but business-wise, for the business, it doesn't make much sense. So in my view, it makes absolutely zero sense for Tesla to reduce prices as long as there's any kind of backlog. Like, I think you'll probably start seeing price reductions again once the wait time is measured in like weeks. If you start seeing it listed as, you know, when you order your Model Y, you'll get it in 4 to 6 weeks. If it starts saying wait times like that again, then that means Tesla has caught up. They've ramped up production and they're kind of matching demand. So whenever they feel like it, they can increase demand just by lowering the prices. It's just like a little dial. As soon as you, even if it's something minor, you could just drop $1,000 off and boom, now you're going to make headlines. People are going to talk about it. Hey, the Model Y just got cheaper. And people go, oh, really? What's the Model Y? And then they look at it and they go, oh, okay. So it's cheaper than it was before. Maybe it's more affordable. Maybe I can swing this. You know, it gets people talking. So you will, if you're not seeing the estimated delivery window in the like 4 to 6 weeks region, don't expect any price decreases. But to be fair, we have seen the delivery window decrease in the wait time. It's not 4 to 6 weeks, but it is like, it used to be like a year-long wait, and now it's more of like a 6 to 9 month wait. So I don't think that means we're getting a price reduction. There's still a pretty significant backlog, but the hope is as Giga Texas ramps, and even Fremont is still ramping, they're trying to increase the capacity of Fremont at the same time. They can address more and more of the market and hopefully get those wait times down. Once the wait times are low enough, then they can start rolling out price reductions. But I covered on this channel back when Tesla was lowering prices. It feels like so long ago now. I literally can't remember the last time. It's been years, but I do recall doing videos where I was like, Tesla reduce the prices. It's usually not drastically. You're not going to wake up and see a $10,000 price reduction. Like, I would love that to happen, and I would be jumping out of my bed and making a video about it at 4 a.m. if it did. But just to be clear, Tesla never reduced prices that drastically. They usually do it pretty slowly just to see how the market responds. So I think, for example, I don't know what the wait time is going to be like next year. I wish I did, but it's really impossible to predict. I would not have predicted that the demand would be this high at this time. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago, I would have thought, before I got this car and before we started saving up for this car, I was going to say, like, I think Teslas are going to get cheaper as time goes on, so that's why I want to spend this time to invest in stocks, and the longer I push off my EV purchase, the better of a deal I'll get. That used to be my logic, and you can find videos of me on this channel saying that. Like, people are like, Drew, you talk about Tesla so much, why don't you buy one? And I was like, well, they're just going to get cheaper. As time goes on, they'll just get more affordable, whereas the stock is only going to get more expensive, so might as well, you know, buy stocks and invest in retirement fund and what have you now, and then in the future I'll buy the Model 2 or I'll buy a cheaper Model 3 or whatever. And that theory ended up being wrong, and the prices ended up getting worse and worse and worse to the point that I was like, wow, now I don't feel like I'm benefiting much by pushing off my purchase. Now I feel like I should order one sooner rather than later. So let's just assume, for the sake of the example, wait times go down. All right, Tesla ramps up really, really successfully at Giga Texas. They're able to hit 500,000 vehicle a year run rate. Fremont is able to expand as well. Berlin ramps, Shanghai ramps, and that means there's less exporting going on, so they can serve their own markets. Let's say middle of next year, like 12 months from today, we see the 4 to 6 week delivery window. Tesla's probably going to lower by $1,000. So, okay, the Model Y is not 66 grand anymore. Now it's 65 grand. Yay, so affordable. And then they'll see what happens. If there's a huge uptick in orders, they'll probably leave it there. If there's not a big change in orders, and they're like, okay, not that many more people are ordering, let's wait a couple weeks and then go down a little bit more. So then they would reduce it by another 1,000. Or maybe if there's really no change in demand, they would lower it by 2,000. Some people, some Tesla bears are going to probably look at that as a bad thing. Like, oh my God, there's no demand. Where I see it as still a tremendous advantage for Tesla, because if you recall, back when Tesla was lowering prices, they never had trouble moving vehicles. Tesla never built vehicles and let them sit on the factory lot for months. Like they built vehicles, and if not enough people were ordering them, then they lowered the prices. It's been so long that a lot of people have forgotten that, but Tesla sold vehicles at a loss, because in their mind, it was better that a vehicle be delivered than sitting waiting for someone to buy it. So, because we know Tesla has such insanely thick margins on the Model Y, probably roughly around 30%, I think they could reduce prices by, 20-25% if they needed to, because just no one was ordering it. And they would still probably sell them at a profit. No, I don't think they'd be as profitable as they are today, but they'd be selling so many vehicles because they'd be building over 1 million Model Ys a year, not, a couple 100,000, that even if your profit margin is only 5% on each vehicle, you're at such extreme scale that the company can afford it. It's not a big deal. So if you imagine that, I know this is not back of the napkin math, but $66,000 Model Y, right? Very expensive. But they've got very thick margins. Maybe demand isn't what they want it to be, so they lower prices, not all at once, but gradually, just over the course of the year. It gets lower and lower and lower. Lower prices by 25%, and they would still have around a 5% margin. Then you could start selling a dual motor long range Model Y for under $50,000. And if you don't believe that would sell at extreme volume, then I don't know what to tell you, considering Model Y is almost best-selling vehicle in the world right now, and it's over 65 grand. Do you think on Friday the Tesla bot will come out on stage and plug in a supercharger capable for Tesla? That would be great, but I'd rather just have the snake charger. I really don't think we need robo-taxis to come out to justify snake chargers. Even if Tesla never solves full self-driving, just having a cable that can plug itself in is awesome. That's so convenient. Imagine if you're at a supercharger, even for safety reasons. If you're at a supercharger and it's raining outside and it's stormy and windy and you just back into the stall and then the cable just plugs itself in, I don't even have to get out of the car for it to charge. And then when I'm done, it unplugs and goes back. That's brilliant. And it could prevent, I always joked in my old videos, it could prevent icing. If a gas car parks in the supercharging stall, then the snake charger just starts smacking the crap out. It just starts dinging. It just spins around. No, that's stupid. But it is a funny idea. Just imagine someone's car getting smacked. They're breaking the taillights and stuff. The other convenience would be as a security measure, if you're at a supercharger and you're in your car and some crazy guy comes at you and he's banging on the glass or he's pointing a gun at you, you can't get out of the car and unplug it. The car will not move if it's plugged in. There's no way to be hey, disconnect this vehicle. Currently, if that situation comes up and they want to mug you, you don't really have a way to get out. You just have to film him and call 911 or hope that he doesn't break the window, I guess. Whereas if we had snake chargers, you could be unplug and the cable will disconnect and then you can drive off. So I know that's not a super common scenario, but it would be handy to just have a charger that could plug itself in. I don't think we need a bot at every supercharger, personally. I have a lot of skepticism surrounding the Tesla bot. It sounds like one of those things that, I don't know. I've heard AI people go off on how they basically think AI can do anything. And then in execution, never honestly performs as good as they said it would, or they just say it needs more time, needs more neural net training. And it's just been so delayed with FSD beta taking as long as it has, and it's just things have been pushed back so much, and other companies have tried to do humanoid robots and say, oh, there is a market for this, and then it never goes anywhere. I'm in that department of like, I'll believe it when I see it, but until then it's just kind of cool demos. um do you ever get anxious about people vandalizing your Tesla in public? I've seen a lot of Tesla hate, like in Wham Bam Tesla Cam. It was at first, I'll admit. Like when I first got the car, I was pretty nervous. Anytime I parked it, I would like look at it, and we'd go into a restaurant, and I would want to sit in a booth or at a table where I can see the car. I just let me keep an eye on this. But the good news is I live in a place where Teslas are not that rare. They're not that special. um, so it's not like there's so many Teslas around. Like I was actually kind of worried because I live in a fairly rural area, and there's a lot of people on my street. I'm in a neighborhood that doesn't have any EVs, but the area has EVs. But in my neighborhood, there's people that love to rev up their noisy gas cars, and they love to in the morning. Every morning I hear it. Oh my God, it drives me nuts. And every time I hear someone revving up their gas engine, I'm just like, I can't wait until they ban that and you can't do that anymore. Because I know that day is coming. It's going to be in a long time, but eventually they're going to make it impossible for you to rev up your car like that. And I look forward to that day because these people annoy the crap out of me. It happened several times today because I go running a lot in the morning. I run around my neighborhood, and when I'm running, there's these cars that drive by and they're just screaming. I hate it. So I was kind of worried that because I think a lot of the people on my street are kind of, gas junkies. They like the noise, they like that smell, and they're like, yeah, gas car. I see. It's where I live. It's very popular for people to have big lifted pickup trucks that they modify and have the giant mufflers and the crazy inefficiency. They look so stupid to me, and I was a little bit worried that driving it home, people would kind of look at me differently, or like, "Oh, that guy bought a Tesla. What is he talking about?" And there was a guy that asked me about, one of my neighbors asked me about it. He was just like, "Why are you driving a Tesla?" And I was like, "Beats paying for gas." But he's just a big VW fan. Like my neighbor was just like, "Well, why didn't you get like an ID4 or a e-Golf or something?" I don't even know if you can you get an e-Golf here? I don't know, but he's a big VW fan, and he wasn't against the concept of EVs. He just wanted to know why I bought a Tesla. And I said, the one I bought is the only vehicle in the US market that has a lithium iron phosphate battery. So I was like, I wanted to play the argument of like, you can't get that with VW. And I was like, this battery's rated to last a really, really long time, and I'll probably never have to replace it. And the supercharging's good and stuff. And he was just, oh, okay. And he was like, they're cool, but if you want to work on your own car, you can't. You have to get everything fixed through them. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, do I look like a guy that works on cars? It's like, I am not the kind of guy that wants to work on my own car in the first place. So I was like, yeah, I mean, if they want to work on it, they can work on it. But that's kind of the nice thing about EVs, right? Is there's not that much maintenance in the first place. Don't forget about the Model Y standard range that is offered to employees. I think Tesla will put it on the configurator next year. I'm fairly confident, based on the conversations I've had and the way Elon phrased it during the last earnings call, they're not making the standard range Model Y anymore. Giga Texas is 100% just building 2170 Model Ys. And there's even people that I disagree with that agree with me on that in regards to following Tesla. Warren Redlick is who I was thinking of. I was on his channel not too long ago, and he was saying, he went to the annual shareholder meeting, and he was there at the Cyber Rodeo when they were building the 4680 Model Ys, and he said when they went back, there was no 4680 Model Ys in production anymore. It was just all 2170. So I think they stopped production of that one because they realized that, personally, I think it's because there's an issue with 4680 ramping, and it's not ramping at that high a scale, so it just makes more sense to sell the long range dual motor. And I do think that there will be a lower range Model Y in the future. I just don't think it'll be 4680. I think the 4680s are probably all going to be for semi and truck, Cybertruck. And the standard range Model Y is just going to be lithium iron phosphate. I think that's going to be the future of most EVs. Um, my power company charges $39 per month with unlimited supercharging in Florida. Wow. I would do that. Even if I didn't have an EV, I would do that. Um, what did he say? Took delivery of LFP Model 3 on September 24th. Wow, can't charge at home, but free level 2 nearby. For health with RLFP, I realize charging to 100% at least weekly is best. Is there a minimum percent to remain above for health? I don't think it matters that much with LFP. I mean, definitely follow the owner's manual advice. Definitely charge to 100% at least once a week. That's what Tesla says. At least. If you can charge to 100% twice a week, that's probably better. I haven't done much research on LFP low percentage states, but because it likes to be at 100% fairly frequently, I would imagine, I mean, probably don't leave it at like under 10 for like days at a time, but you know, if it's just overnight, it's at 15. I don't think that's a big deal. um how do you charge every day? Do you charge to 100 every week? Yeah, there's certain days in the week where we're running errands or we're visiting people that we know are further away, not like road trip levels of distance, but you know, on those occasional, we usually go to a nearby town that's not as rural as where we are. We usually go to a nearby town about twice a week. So the nights before we go to that town, we charge up to 100% the night before. So I make sure that it gets at least once a week, but normally twice. Um, someone keeps driving by my house at 12:30 in the morning. That's annoying. I live in a safe neighborhood, but there are a lot of sketchy people around. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm grateful that, you know, I was a little bit worried because I know some of my neighbors here are very, you know, gas junkies, and I see them rev up their cars late at night. I was worried that they would kind of look at me or want to vandalize the car or something. Haven't had any issues yet. You know, that could change, but no one like noticed. At first I thought like, oh God, all eyes are going to be on me when I drive home. And like, this is the first time a Tesla's ever been on this street, I think, ever. I've never had any of my friends with Teslas come here. So I was like, this is probably the first Tesla to drive down this road. And no one cared. You know, even with the people outside, I drove down and no one looked at me or was like, what is he driving? You know, no one cared. And some people may have been bummed out by that because they buy a Tesla and they're hoping people look at them like, yeah, look at me. I got a new car. Yeah. But I was the opposite. I was like, I want as little people looking at me as possible. I want, I want like no attention to be drawn to me. There were actually several friends we visited with the Tesla that didn't know we got a new car, and we don't say anything. We just don't bring it up because we're not trying to be flashy. You know, I cover it for the channel because that's my job, and so, you know, I document the delivery process because, of course, EV people are gonna watch that, of course. But as far as outside of work, like we didn't tell people about it. We weren't like, hey, you know, we got a new car. Do you want to see it? You know. At least I wasn't. I charge at home, though, to answer your question. Always love bears. Yeah, I just have a NEMA 1450 outlet, which is like a dryer outlet. And it charges, honestly, faster than it needs to. Back when we installed that outlet a few years ago, it was because back then my wife was working at this nearby town that we go to pretty regularly. And we thought that she was going to need to drive on average about 50 miles a day. And we thought, okay, if we're driving 50 miles a day at least, and maybe more if we're running errands and groceries and stuff, we better get, you know, the faster charger. So we installed a plug that supports basically 7 kilowatts speed. But since then, my wife isn't working at that place anymore, so there's not a need to drive. We're not driving 50 miles a day at all. Some days we don't drive 10 miles just because I'm working from home and she's not at that job anymore. So in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have installed such a high amperage plug. We probably could have gotten by with the 110 outlet. But we didn't know. So, you know, I guess if we're in a pinch someday and we need to charge very quickly, I guess we can, but that day has not come yet. Typically, I don't want the car to charge up to 100% and be there for too long, because even though lithium iron phosphate is high cycle, it's still better for it to not be kept at 100% for extended periods. So I've intentionally, you can slow down the charge speed from the Tesla app, just using this little what's it called, the little triangles here. It's set to 32 amps right now, but you can lower it down to like 5 amps if you want to. So there's nights where like it's plugged in and I'm going to bed, but I don't want it to, the state of charge is already pretty high, but because it's LFP, I know I need to get it to 100. So I'm like, I want you to be at 100%, but I want you to be at 100% like an hour before I wake up, not like for 6 hours, which is what it would have done if it was at full speed. So that's when I'll like slow down the state of charge and be like, you charge to 100%, but take your time, like no rush. So I've intentionally slowed it down several times. Hey, Mike in the Woods is in the chat. I just wanted to say congratulations to Mike in the Woods, because he recently decided to order his Model 3, and I think he's getting the exact same spec as me to hold him over until the Cybertruck is ready. I know Mike ultimately wants the Cybertruck in the end, but this is not a bad waiting room, and I do think it'll probably hold its resale value fairly well. Highly doubtful Cybertruck will start in 2023 and ramp will be slow. Yeah, you're probably right, Mike. I hate to be the what's it called, Debbie Downer on that subject, but I'm fairly doubtful that Cybertruck production will begin, at least in mid 2023. And if it does, it's not going to be high volume. So why slow down the state of charge instead of just changing your schedule? It's weird. It's something I wish they could kind of change, but you can schedule charging, but when you schedule charging, the car doesn't pull its battery from the house. Sorry, not better. The car doesn't pull its energy from the house. When you enable scheduled charging, any like standby, Sentry mode, or if there's an update, or the car just uses energy in the background. If you do scheduled charging, it pulls all of that standby energy from its own battery. So even if you have scheduled charging turned on, you will see the percentage go down. Whereas if you set a charge limit, like what I have it to right now, the state of charge is actually higher. Long story, I couldn't change my charge limit because my car was in service this week. But basically, my car is currently sitting at 85%, and I have the charge limit set to 79%. So when the car views it as charging is complete, the wire in the cord in the app is solid green. The button is green on the back. And if it's doing standby stuff like I am right now, I'm using the HVAC and I'm lighting myself with the screen and the sun visor here. It's pulling all this energy from the wall, not from the battery. Whereas if I enabled scheduled charging, it would be pulling all of this energy from the battery, which I don't want to put excess cycles on the battery. I know I probably don't need to. I'm honestly not that worried about the high voltage battery, which is the big one, the 62 kilowatt hour, the LFP battery. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm more worried because a lot of this stuff is powered by the 12-volt low-voltage battery, which is lithium-ion based, but I've heard stories of those going bad or people having to replace them. And because I use my car as an office a lot of the time, like I'm charging my MacBook right now, it's just plugged in as I'm live streaming, and I use Tesla Theater, and I'm using the HVAC, and I use lights and stuff. I charge my phone in here. I would rather all of that be powered by the house, not by the 12-volt battery. So no one's told me if I'm wrong in that theory. I could be wrong in that theory. Maybe it's still using the 12-volt battery ultimately. But I just know that I would rather not put excess cycles on the car, and I know that scheduled charging doesn't pull energy from the house, whereas I want it to. I wish they could change that though. It would be nice if you could schedule charge, and even though it's scheduled to start charging at midnight, when you're at off-peak hours, it could still pull standby energy from the house. I don't know. Maybe that's too nitpicky. I don't want any attention with Tesla. I just want to drive my new cool car. Well, I can assure you, depending on where you live, I don't think a Model 3 really grabs that much attention because they're just so common now. And they ultimately, they're cool looking. I love the look of the Model 3, honestly. I just love seeing it in the driveway or seeing it parked. But it's still just a sedan. It's an aerodynamic sedan. Those are pretty common. People are used to seeing them. But if any of you watching out there are buying the Cybertruck, oh my God, you guys are going to have conversations everywhere you go. Any family reunion, restaurants, uh, family outings, events, like everywhere you go, people are going to look at you and be like, oh my God, that guy has a cyber, like, what the heck is that? Some people won't know what a Cybertruck is. And you're going to have to explain yourself. Why the heck would you drive a car like that? Why would you pick a truck like that? And you're going to have to sell every person that you see every time you park. This is why I bought the Cybertruck. Why did you buy the Cybertruck? Well, because this made sense and I like this. It's oh my God. You're gonna be making conversation everywhere you go. Neem, thank you for supercharging. Yeah, especially if you're in California, that's true. If you're in California, Model 3 and Y are basically almost as common as Honda Civics. So I have not turned many heads with my car, other than family members. When I go to a family's house, they're like, whoa, hey. They want to ride in it and stuff. If you are at a public charger, you can slow down the charge to avoid the extra fees for not unplugging after full. You can slow down the charge to avoid the... See, I don't relate to that because the free charger I go to is just by the hour. So you'd want to charge as fast as you can. Like if you go to a movie, change charging speed to cover the time of the movie. Are there public chargers that charge you fees if the car is full? Maybe I haven't found one of those yet, but no, I haven't noticed that. Have you done any other road trips other than the San Diego one with Pearl? Not any that required supercharging. We went to a pumpkin patch a couple weeks ago with my sister. That was fun. And we didn't go crazy far, but it was like over an hour to get there and then over an hour to get back. That's probably not your definition of a road trip, huh? So, yeah. No, we've done a lot of like casual daily driving, though. I've been having to keep up with family stuff that has come up recently. Nothing to be worried about, but just more responsibility has fallen on us than we're used to. So that's involved driving to a lot of people's houses more frequently. And so we're using it like pretty much daily at this point. You know, before the family stuff came up, there were some days where the car wasn't even going anywhere. I was still using it, for the record. I still come in here and film and do my work because it's just a great mobile office. I love working in here. So I still use it even though it's not driving somewhere, but now we're definitely driving pretty much every day. The chargers have a charge fee if you leave plugged in after full. See, I just haven't found a public charger that's fast enough to get me to full in the first place. I've charged at public chargers, but I've never hit full. They charge mine charge fees after a certain amount of time. So the one I charge at is free for 2 hours, and then after 2 hours it's like $2 an hour or something like that, or it gets worse over time. It probably has idle fees if I get to full. I just never have. I didn't realize there was a 12 volt in the LFP. That's definitely a huge variable. Please update us in a video when you learn more about how all that works. I've tried, genuinely. Like, I go down the subreddits and I just send out tweets because I know there's a lot of Tesla Twitter people in the community. And I'm just like, hey, I'm using my car as an office. How do I avoid damaging the 12 volt? You know, what's the best way to handle battery health? Really, again, oh, God. What is that? Ooh. There's like a fly in here. What the heck? How did a fly get in here? Go. Go! It's the light, probably. He's drawn to the light. Oh, jeez. Tesla's a home office deduction. No, we have looked into that. I don't know if I got him out or not. But, yeah, trying to write off your car as a business deduction is so complicated. You have to like track miles and personal miles versus work miles and write it off over several years. It's a lot easier if you lease, but you're leasing, so that's not financially wise either. So we did not lease. So yeah, I don't think we're gonna do much write-offs or anything. Do you know why Kelly Blue Book's 5-year cost of ownership of Teslas is so high? Is it accurate? I think I read something about that. It seemed a little skewed. I was trying to remember. I think they like were accounting for like service appointments that not everybody would have to do or something, or like they were assuming you would replace components that would go bad that don't normally go bad. I don't know. I didn't look super into that article, but I remember reading it and thinking that doesn't sound right. And there's definitely a lot of bias against Tesla, the media. I mean, there is still maintenance. I read a little insert from Tesla's website the other day that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. They said Teslas do not require any regular maintenance. And I was like, okay, well, that's not exactly true. I mean, you actually have to service tires more frequently than you do with a gas car because EVs are so heavy. So, sure, you don't have to worry about brake pad replacements or oil changes as frequently. Or if you have smog checks in your area, you don't have to do smog checks anymore. But that doesn't mean there's no regular maintenance. Like, I just didn't like the way that was worded. So I think the tire service you need does go up for sure, but I don't think it's disproportionate to how much you save on gas on average. I'm an accountant, and you can take a lot of work. And it takes a lot of work. Leases are easier. Yes. Okay. I think, I don't know if Jared has watched the same videos I've watched, but I saw a YouTube video of a guy that explained how basically he writes off his Tesla as a business expense for his company, and he basically has to lease all his vehicles in order for it to work. And I really didn't want to lease a Tesla because they don't let you keep the car after the lease is out, and I want to keep the car. I want to see how it ages. I want to own it for the long haul. Tech Yonic Newt says, how do I avoid attention with my future Aptera? Referrals at least if I can't. Yeah, I don't think there will be a good way to avoid that, though. That's a good point. Aptera is very bizarre, very different looking vehicle, and it's probably going to carry a lot of stigma with it. People are going to be like, is that a motorcycle, or is that a death trap? Like, you're going to die in that thing. Like, I feel like that's where everyone goes. I love to share the Aptera with people when we talk about EVs. Any chance I can, I'm just like, hey, check out this car. This can literally charge from the sun, and that gets it like 30 to 40 miles of range a day. And they're like, yeah, but if you're in a car crash, you'll instantly die. And I'm like, okay, would you say that if I showed you, like, if I was a motorcycle guy? Like, sometimes I get really ticked off with a lot of people's approach towards EVs. Like, they just write them off so quick just because they're different. Anything that's not the social norm, like, I'm not trying to cause drama or anything, but like, we were at a gathering, is all I'll say. I'm not naming names or anything. We were at a gathering a while back, and we told someone about our car, where they were asking, like, what's new with you guys or what's changed, and we didn't have a ton of answers, so we were just like, well, I mean, we got a new car, and they were like, oh, really, what'd you get? And we were like, well, it's basically like the cheapest Tesla you can buy, but it's really fun, and we've enjoyed it. And they were like, so what are you going to do in 5 years when the battery's dead? And I was like, bruh, like, you just go straight to the negative, like, as quick as you can. Like, that was the first question. It wasn't even like, hey, congratulations, hey, that's awesome. It was just like, and like, not 5 minutes before we told them about that, they told us that they were getting a new car. And, you know, we weren't like, well, it better be an electric one, right? Otherwise you hate the planet. No, we were like, oh, what kind of car? And they're like, oh, it's this Kia something. You know, it wasn't an EV. It was just a gas sedan, a somewhat newer gas sedan. And they were like, yeah, my dad helped me get a really good deal on it or something. You know, they were telling us about it, and I was like, oh, that's great. Like, oh, that looks fun. Like, they showed me the pictures of the car, and I was like, oh, nice, good for you. Like, I was very excited, you know, and congratulatory. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And then as soon as we bring up our car, they're like, yeah, but where do you charge it? Like, there's no way to charge it, and the grid's gonna go out. Like, it's crazy that Governor Newsom wants everybody to turn off their air conditioners and yet buy electric car. Why do they want us all to buy electric? And I was like, bruh, like, can you just could you just at least, like, fake it? Can you just pretend to be happy? Like, what? I get it if you're not interested in buying an EV. Honestly, that's fine, because there's too many people buying EVs right now, and we don't have enough EVs for everyone. So I kind of have that. A lot of people online, especially in Tesla Twitter, are like convinced that they need to tell everybody to buy a Tesla or an EV of some kind. Like, you all need to buy EVs, and if you're not buying an EV, you're an idiot. And like, I'm more of the route of like, well, some people, they're probably just not ready for it or they don't feel comfortable with it. And I don't try to convince everybody everybody in my family or all my friends. I don't tell all of them to buy EVs. I really don't. In fact, I can't think of anybody that I was like, you should buy a Tesla. I've never said that to someone. Unless they're like asking me, I want to buy electric. What should I get? Honestly, at this point, I'm kind of more inclined to offer them like, well, what do you want to use it for? And usually my next question is like, do you road trip a lot, or are you just wanting something to drive around town? And if you just drive around town, I'll probably recommend something like a Chevy Bolt long before I would recommend a Model 3. But I don't push EVs on people, but it just kind of annoys me when as soon as you tell someone that you got it, they're just so like that they need to convince you that it was a bad purchase. And it's like it's okay to be like happy for someone and agree that that's not for you. Like I don't I don't know. It just annoyed me a little bit that there's these people that, I'm friends with and I respect, and I'm not trying to burn any bridges here. It's just like, oh yeah, here's our new car. And they're like, yeah, the grid though. Look, yeah, the battery's not going to work in after 5 years. And I was just like, now you're forcing me to be the geeky nerd because I have to correct you now. Either I can roll my eyes and go, yeah, I guess I bought a stupid car, huh? Because it's all going to break in 5 years. No, of course I don't say that. I go, well, actually, this vehicle has a special chemistry in it, and it's rated to last up to like 2,000 or 4,000 cycles. Which means it could basically, theoretically last, it could go 1,000,000 miles before needing the battery to replace. So that's what I explained. I said, yeah, no, the battery, when he asked me, like, what are you going to do in 5 years when the battery doesn't work anymore? I told him, no, the battery will work and I'll keep driving it. Like, no big deal. It's not a problem. Oh, that's crazy. Guys, I caught the fly. I felt it land on my leg and I just grabbed it with my bare hands. So I'm gonna roll down the window now. And thankfully, we have, I know that's kind of gross, we have baby wipes. So I can clean my hands, because that's kind of gross. I don't want to touch anything until I wipe this down. The awkward conversations with people like that is literally the worst. I know, because it puts me in a really uncomfortable position. Like, what am I supposed to say? Either I have to become the nerd that's like, actually it's lithium iron phosphate, that's totally fine. Or I go, yeah, I guess we'll have to throw it out, huh? I made a stupid decision, didn't I? Like, either, no matter what I say, it's just in an awkward place. Like, if someone bought a new car, I don't care what kind of car it is, you should just be like, hey, congrats, do you like it? Just ask, yeah, I like it. Oh, that's great, I'm glad you like it. It's like, if someone told me they were watching a new TV show and they said, yeah, I really like it, and I'd be like, I heard it sucks. Did you watch it? No, but someone told me it sucks. Oh, okay, well, I liked it. Yeah, but I heard it. It's like, it's that kind of conversation. If someone told me they watched a new TV show that I hadn't seen and they really liked it, I'd be like, oh, that's cool, interesting, what do you like about it? Oh, this is cool. Oh, good for you. Just come on, just be nice, people. Be nice. Did you hear about that one autopilot crash this year? It's so unsafe, bro. It shouldn't be legal. I know. I get that one a lot too. Turn on autopilot, people get so uncomfortable. Meanwhile, they use their phone while they're driving. And there's people texting and driving. Oh my God. I try to walk places when I can. I was walking down the street because we were running errands or something. And there was a bunch of traffic, which there normally isn't. I think we were near a school or something. A bunch of people were picking up their kids from school. And so many people in traffic are on their freaking phone as they're driving. And I'm just like, put your freaking phones away. Like, people die every day because of this stuff. And people are just like, they're not paying attention. And there's kids walking everywhere. And the driving these giant lifted pickup trucks that are spewing out deadly fumes. I feel like I sound crazy. I know. I sound petty. People are like, Drew, it's just cars, no big deal. But I'm sorry, when you've been, what's the term? It's not red pilled, is it? I don't want to be associated with something political. I just mean when you've drank the EV juice, you know, when you when you've accepted the precious lithium into your life and you start seeing how much gas we're pumping everywhere and how inefficient when you start obsessing over aerodynamics and you start, like with my job in the EV space, you start dwelling more on efficiency and how much energy a vehicle consumes. And we debate about, well, you know, the Rivian is about 70 miles per gallon equivalent, whereas the Hummer is more like 49. You know, you start getting hung up on those details. And then you see these like giant lifted pickup trucks that are spewing out fumes or, oh, it just, and they're texting as they're driving around in them. It drives me nuts. You don't need to buy an EV, but buying a newer gas car is kind of silly. Buy a used gas if you're not getting some kind of EV. That's always been my advice, Dom, is like, yeah, like with an EV, it makes sense in my view that you spend more because you spend more up front, but you spend less in the long run because there's less maintenance and service and stuff to worry about. With a gas car, the expenses of gasoline are going to be so, in maintaining it, even if it's a newer one, is going to be fairly high. So you should try to make the entry level price as low as you possibly can. Like, don't spend a lot on it, because you can get a really nice gas car that just has a few thousand miles on it. Just from gas cars depreciate so much faster. So it's like if you buy a gas car that's 5 or 6 years old, you'll spend substantially less money on it than the new model, and there's really not that many differences. And you'll have the high range, and you'll probably get pretty good efficiency. Even some older cars still have CarPlay and stuff. So yeah, I agree with you, Dom. Like, I don't see much point in anybody at this state buying a new gas car. A used gas car is understandable, though. There's a lot of people in that financial position. They just can't. I get that. Like, I'm not expecting... I think it's a misconception by a lot of the EV community that our job as EV influencers, if you want to call us that, like a lot of channels think that our job is to convince everybody to buy an EV. Like, that's what we need to do. And personally, I don't think the EV market needs that. I think the EVs will convince people themselves. There's some people that don't want to go electric. I know that. Sorry, the bitrate took a massive dive there. I'm going to pause the playback, see if that fixes it. It should recover. Oh my god, it's so pixelated. I'm sorry. Usually it recovers itself in a few seconds. But now it's taking its time. Hopefully you can still hear me at least. I know I look really bad. It's got to be ultra pixelated right now. We're rolling bricks down the highway powered by rocket fuel. Yeah, that's correct. It's slowly fixing itself. Just give it a minute and I won't look as bad. Warning dad joke. My car is self-driving. I drive it myself. Your eyes are open to how antiquated gas cars and anything that runs on gas is. Yeah, and like the impact it has on our culture and our climate and our air quality and everything. Once the market starts to demand EVs this crazy amount in the next 5 to 10 years, gas car resale is going to drop like a rock. I do think it will drop fairly substantially once EV availability goes way up. But yeah, right now, like, I've shown off this car, and I'm sure lots of other channels have shown off lots of different EVs, whether it's the Mach-E, ID4, Ioniq 5, EV6. There's so many great EVs on the market that people document their experience with. And as you guys can probably attest, like, a lot of people watching this all this EV content are not EV owners. It's not like a community that we're actively trying to like push to more people. It's like there's a lot of people that watch EV content that are like, I want to get one day, I just can't right now because it's too expensive. I think the issue with adoption is not desirability. I don't think there's something wrong with the cars and we need to make the cars more desirable. I think the problem is availability, because that indirectly affects price. If your argument is, no, Drew, the main problem is they're not affordable enough, the reason they're not affordable enough is because there's not that many available. So if you can only build a certain number of cars, and you have a certain amount of demand, you price them accordingly. That's what we're seeing with Tesla. There's so much demand, that's why the prices went way up. If the availability of Teslas went way up, that's when you could start lowering prices and make them more affordable again. So that's why my belief is that, like, it's more important to provide like context of like what the market's going through, what's available. And sure, it's fun to talk about which EVs are the right ones to buy, or which one caters to the demographic that you're in. But ultimately, I don't think the problem is there's not enough people buying EVs. There's like Mike in the Woods just says, I want to get one, but they are too expensive. Me until recently. And there's no shame in that. I hope you guys know. Like recently, to be honest, it kind of was getting to me. Normally, I have pretty thick skin, and I can handle a lot of criticism. And it's not constructive criticism. That's not what I'm talking about. I can handle constructive criticism all day. That's never got to me. What was getting to me was I did a video recently based on what the channel members voted on. I said, I have a couple of video ideas for the week. What do you guys want me to talk about first? And what won the result of the poll was comparing standard connectivity to premium connectivity, which I always thought would be an interesting video. Like, let's talk about these two different options. And I had premium connectivity for 30 days. Now I have standard. How do I feel? Is it worth it? Is it worth paying the extra $10 a month? A lot of people were asking about that. So I did a video on it, and man, so many people were so like just rude. And it's not constructive criticism. I know what that looks like. That's like, I don't like when you talk about a subject with this argument, or I don't like it when you film with this angle, or I don't like your audio. That's one thing. Or honestly, constructive criticism is when you suggest something. I don't like this, you should try this. Saying I don't like this video, or I don't like you, that's not constructive criticism. That's just called being rude. And a lot of people were just like, oh my God, Drew, like, why are you so broke? Why are you so poor? And like, okay, that ticks me off in several ways, because for one, it's just not true. Like the concept that because I don't want to pay for premium connectivity, that means I'm poor. Like, no, that's not how that works. Second of all, even if it was true, would you really shame someone? Like, if someone was in a really tight and really tough financial position to the point where they couldn't afford to subscribe to a membership, or they didn't think it was financially responsible to buy something, whether it's a car or whatever, would you really like shame them for having less money? Like, does anyone who chooses to buy something that, or chooses not to buy something that you decide to buy, are they poor and broke? Like, that's just such a immature, it's such an irresponsible way to treat other people. And there's been a lot of comments like that, even on the tech channel lately, because I just didn't want to upgrade to the latest iPhone. People are like, oh, you're broke, you're poor. It's like, it's just such a rude way to treat someone. And it's also just factually not true. So that bugged me a lot. And I hope you guys know, because I know there's a lot of you watching that, like Doug here says, I'm an EV wannabe, and Michael Mooney says, I'm not an EV owner yet, been waiting since January on my Model Y order. Well, you've got one coming, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that are interested, and Alpha is a great example as well, that are interested in electric vehicles, that they want to be a part of it, but they're not in a great financial position to be in right now. There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that, and I know exactly what that's like, because I was in that stage for many years. Many years. I was like, I love Teslas, I love EVs, and I want to own one. I definitely would never spend more than, a couple grand on a gas car, but I would spend tens of thousands of dollars on an EV because I want to support that, and I believe that's the future. And I don't think anybody should be shamed because of them deciding something's not worth it to them, or they can't financially swing it at that certain point in life. It's okay to not be able to afford something. Don't let people, if you have friends or there's people in your social lives that are shaming you because of how much money you have, get away from them. Like, don't tolerate people like that in your life. It's awful. I don't know, with the way the market is and how long cars are lasting, EVs might become an appreciating asset for the next 5 to 10 years or so. I would hope so. I think certain EVs will, but vehicles that ramp the fastest and at the highest volume, I think will become more available. Therefore, when there's more of them, it's just a supply and demand discussion again. It's like if there's a crap ton of Model Ys on the market because Tesla's building more Model Ys than anything, then it would make sense for those to get cheaper. But if there's vehicles that are not ramping and they're not building that many of them, then yeah, if they're high in demand and low in supply, they'll keep their resale value pretty high. I agree. Um, it is 150,000 US dollars with taxes and certificates for a base Model 3 in Singapore. As much as I want it so bad, yeah, that's crazy. I understand why you can't swing that. I couldn't swing that either in your shoes. Um, let's see. Thank you for creating a forum to talk about EVs. I bought a Model 3 in 2019, Model Y in 2021, and have never looked back. ICE is already dead in my mind. Cybertruck order in place, just waiting. Well, good for you. I hope it gets to you soon. But yeah, I know how you feel. In my view, that's not a debate on whether or not electric cars are the future. It's just a matter of time. Um, I'm waiting on Tesla to come out with a Bolt-like car, and more it just feels like it might never happen. Teslas are far too expensive for me right now. Yeah, it definitely feels like Tesla's having less and less interest in selling cheaper cars. They just want to do robo-taxis, which kind of bums me out. But I do think that the competition will get better, and they have gotten a lot better. The new Chevy Bolt is honestly a really good deal if you don't need super fast charging. That's pretty much the only issue with the Bolt, but it's not a terrible design, and it's got decent range, and it's not crazy expensive. It's honestly a really good option, I think, for a lot of people. I would probably recommend the Bolt before I recommend the Tesla. But what if it's your parents that are shaming you? I'm surprised mine haven't disowned me yet. That does suck. I know that's a situation that you can't easily get out of. I guess I would just not bring it up. Um, I understand that parents can be difficult, but you're probably better off just keeping the peace. Just don't bring it up if you can help it. Um, same that in the Leaf, but the Leaf is half the range for the cost. Yeah, the Bolt is kind of the only affordable-ish EV I know of in the U.S. Yeah, especially with the tax credit, it gets pretty dang cheap. Michael Mooney says, I thought I would never spend more than $40,000 on a car. I also figured used Teslas would come way down after a few years and they sell instantly at high prices. My hope is that because they're ramping Model Y production so much, those will eventually become the cheapest. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but just because of the single piece castings and the iron phosphate, I think that Tesla will ramp up Model Ys to an extreme amount in the future, to the point where they might even become the cheapest Tesla, depending on what they do with Model 3. If they reach the point where Model 3 demand dwindles down to nearly nothing, then it would probably make sense to shut down the Model 3 line and update it to have castings and a structural pack, maybe BYD blade batteries could help. And they could manufacture the Model 3 for a lot cheaper than what it's currently costing them to build. It just doesn't make sense to shut down the line when you have a backlog. So that's why they're not, in case you're wondering, why haven't they brought single-piece castings or a structural pack to the Model 3? There's so many people waiting on them, so you're just going to build them as fast as you can, and shutting down the assembly line to update it is going to slow down the production ramp. So if you don't have the demand, it makes sense to shut it down and update it. But yeah, I think they could get to that point, but you got to ask yourself, is the demand really gonna slow down, or is it just going to continue to grow? You're basically in a bidding war. If someone else is willing to pay more than you, then Tesla has no reason to lower prices. Any EV is better than pretty much any gasser, but used gas car prices will be pretty competitive for a while, methinks. Well, yeah, it's just like our last car. We paid under $4,000 for our last car. So it's really hard to beat that with any EV. Even if Tesla released a $10,000 vehicle, I'd be like, well, that one's $4,000. The rumor is that they're going to upgrade Model 3 in fall of 24. Nah, I don't think Tesla thinks that far ahead. As long as there's a backlog, there's very little reason to update the Model 3. Does having white interior practically affect the temperature versus the black interior in winter/summer? I don't have a black Tesla to compare it to, but I have seen people online say that the white interior stays a little cooler. I don't think it's that noticeable. It's not like night and day, no pun intended, differences. but probably a little bit. They probably don't absorb as much heat. Um, let's see. I didn't think I could ever get an EV until IMIEV popped up on eBay one day 7 years ago and ended up winning the auction for $7,700. Been a perfect commuter and second car for us. That's awesome, Timothy. I'm glad. That's really cool. I'm glad you like it. I got to wrap up here in a second, but Jorge says, Lucid Air Grand Touring and Model 3 Performance owner here. Let me tell you, 516 miles of range is awesome. I will wait as long as it takes for the 500-mile range Cybertruck model. I'm sure it is. I can just tell you from my own experience, I don't want to drive a car that long. I've driven a car 500 miles. I don't. And I also just don't know how I feel about charging at Electrify America, hoping that the stations are online and not knowing if they are. I guess that would be a good reason then to have a high range EV, because you don't have to stop as much at Electrify America. You charge your Grand Touring at the Walmart parking lot. Whatever works for you, but I just don't think the future is going to be 500-mile range EVs. I think it's going to be most people realizing they can live with sub 300-mile range EVs and spend a lot less money. Because ultimately, if you can build a $40,000 EV with 500 miles of range, then you could easily build a $20,000 EV with 300 miles of range, if that's possible, profitably. You should debadge your car, would look so nice. I've seen debadged Teslas. It almost attracts more attention than you'd think. Oh, that one doesn't have the logo. Like, he debadged. It almost draws more attention to it. That's okay. I'm fine with the logo. Wear it proud. Tesla owner. I ordered black interior, but I think I might get some white seat covers for the front seats. Yeah, it might be worth a try, just to see how it feels. It'll be crazy to see Lucid undercut the Model S eventually if that does come to fruition. I really want it to. Sorry, I know I'm pixelated again. It's all compressed. T-Mobile's freaking out, I think. I'm streaming. My Wi-Fi is kind of far from the laptop, but normally it's okay. Anyway, I hope Lucid can undercut the Model S. Honestly, at this point, it's really not that hard to undercut the Model S. The Model S is freaking expensive. But Lucid also seems to just keep coming up with more expensive options. Every month it feels like here's a more expensive tier. Here's a more expensive tier. It's like, can you guys actually just make the cheap ones? Because I think that's what most people are ordering. Lucid Air Pure is not a bad deal if they can release it, but I don't know if they can sell that profitably. Do you think they will be adding powered frunk? Wouldn't surprise me. That seems like a very bizarre thing to not have all this time. It's one of those things I could see them, like, we wake up one day and they added it because it's just a little piece. So, yeah. I don't know when they would add it, but I think at some point in the next 5 years we'll probably get a powered frunk. I'd still be the guy who puts the chrome trim back on. I want to see who can do that. Does any service offer Chrome Plus, Chrome Edition, matte black delete? I don't know what you want to call it. But anyway, I could do this all night if I'm not careful, and I've been going for a while. I'm just curious, actually, what happens if I close this and put on dark mode? Oh, yeah, it's so much darker. So there's actually a lot of natural lighting features built into the Tesla. I didn't use any aftermarket lighting. That's kind of cool. Anyway, I just wanted to thank our enhanced and executive members of the Tesla Fund as we're signing off here. Joshua Vinnick, Dennis P., Dr. Mark Choi, who's a dentist in the Woodland area, Bennett Williams, Joshua Levitsky, Robert Brindle, Matt S., and Alex Ding. Thank you guys so much for your extra support. Really means a lot. And I appreciate you guys just for watching, and our new channel members today. Thank you. And I look forward to streaming again soon. You guys are awesome. I had a great time. Hope you did too. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.